Alright, everybody, welcome to the Eerie Hours. I'm your host, Gene Skinner. I hope we're all having a good night tonight. Hope we are all ready for a talk about Faye because I'm kind of waiting on something for Off the Deep End a little bit. Because I know one of the things that's been the biggest thing is, Seth Rogen dealing with the backlash of, mayhem of whatever, of Ninja Turtle shit, which is really bad looking. And he's having a little big boy tantrum about it, but I decided to wait a little bit to see if he has any more gold besides the small things that I've heard so far. The backlash of how people do not like how April looks, of other things, how the turtles look bad, all that shit. But I thought, it's March. It's all about women sometimes, I guess. That's, a thing. But more than anything else, it's Irish month. So I thought, let's go with some Celtic demons. Even though we've covered them before a little bit, let's talk more about the Fae in general and all they have to offer. If Seth Rogen has more of a fit this coming week, maybe next Friday will be an Off the Deep End on him. But until then, oh, by the way, I was just cracking open a Contact Haze. I don't have any super new beer yet. I'm getting some in the mail, but I just have my Elysium stuff still. So I'll be drinking that tonight for the stream. And I think it's kind of fitting to be called Haze, especially how, the stuff of the Fae are in, realms of shadow, otherworld kind of things going on. But anyway, let's get into the first thing here we have to watch. Oh, and if you're wondering, maybe you're, looking at the, my channel wondering where some of the videos are, I've unlisted everything for a bit, because I have 2 strikes on my channel now, so I really don't want to take the risk of just having that all up there and just getting, a weird strike again for a video that's, a year or 2 old. They'll be back, but I'm just keeping them unlisted for now, just in case you were wondering that. I don't know if you were or not, but now it's brought to your attention, so that's why they're gone. They're not gone, really. They're just unlisted to keep YouTube from being a piece of shit and getting rid of our channel, getting rid of my channel, really. But I know you guys love, watching everything. Don't mean to keep saying so much. I hate doing that. But anyway, let's watch the history of the fairies. This is from Mythology and Fiction Explained. Here we go.
The term fairy nowadays for the most part has positive connotations, and from the media we consume, you'd be forgiven for thinking fairies such as Tinkerbell or the fairy godmother were the textbook definition. Although they do technically fall under the definition of what a fairy can be, I think it's best if we take this very Disney-esque depiction and ignore it for now. Which then begs the question, what is a fairy? Terms such as fae, fairfolk or fairy have been used across many European cultures, and they refer to physical beings or spirits with supernatural qualities.
They don't have to all be
so
women,
given
by the
that
way,
very
either,
broad definition,
a
fairy can essentially be any
fae,
mythical creature. It's not a specific type of creature, but more so a term used to categorize a whole bunch of creatures. Hence why fairy tales contain all manner of magical creatures, from dragons, elves, goblins, dwarves, and of course fairies. Sometimes they have a close connection to humans and are fairly benevolent, and other times their stories are much darker than the fairy tales you may find today. In order to understand these origins and why they may not have always been so bright and cheery, we need to examine the different types of fairy.
Which there are a lot. Technically, sorry, I'm going to pause here real quick, just to make this a clear thing. If you've ever heard of the tale of the Wild Hunt, those are technically fae, too. They're fae that are ghost riders, basically, that ride along night and kill people, or take them off to the hunt of, I think, the apocalypse, or something like that? It's something like that. I don't know the entire thing, but that's what the Wild Hunt are fae. They're also fucking fae, and they're terrifying looking. Ghost riding horse. Undead, basically. Look at Drog. Play your Vidya game. Krampus is gonna steal you. The Rock was one. Yeah, he was the Tooth Fairy. It's true. Never let him forget that either. The big dumb idiot. Yeah, Wild Hunt 100% predates Witcher 3.
In Scotland, fairies are classified into 2 categories, which are now commonly used in several other countries.
fairies
They are
who seek to harm
divided
humans.
into the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court.
Wow.
The Seelie Court are the fairies that wish to help humans. They are described as the most beautiful and vibrant of fairies. They seek out humans for favors, and in return offer assistance when needed.
I don't know if you want to get their favors, you don't need
if they are
a
offended
fairy.
by a human, they will always
So I'm guessing
attempt
the
to
tooth fairy rips
rectify
off
the
all your teeth and then
situation. These
beats you
fairies
with
are
a
commonly
bag of gold.
associated with the spring and summer, as they prefer to be out in the light. The Unseelie Court are their much darker counterparts. They are hideous and have no interest in being friendly.
No.
They are most active in the autumn and winter, as they prefer to travel in the dark. They dabble in dark magic and will harm humans merely to entertain themselves. They also routinely steal human children, as they themselves are unable to reproduce.
Yes.
Fairies can also be categorized as trooping, solitary, and domesticated. Trooping refers to organized groups of fairies. Fairies that have formed their own society and have their own rules and laws to govern by.
Okay.
Solitary fairies prefer to be alone, and are almost always tricksters or sinister creatures. Domesticated fairies are normally part of a household. In exchange for their labor and service, they are given food and a place to stay. Fairies in general are normally described as very small human-like creatures with wings. However, their size can vary, as many of them can imitate humans in form. We also have many fairies who
elves are technically fae too, by the way.
Do not have wings, so there is no one-size-fits-all description for fairies.
Like, they have a broad fucking category of stuff they're under.
The changeling is a type of fairy common in all sorts of European folklore. They were left behind by fairies when a human had been stolen, commonly a child.
Hi, Mood. How you doing?
The changeling would mimic the missing person's appearance, although this disguise was never perfect. A superior intellect to a child of the same age could be hidden, but facial hair, long teeth, and abnormally large beady eyes may make you question if this was really your child. The changeling story is quite sad, with some rather dark undertones. It's common for them to be referred to as oafs, because they were the deformed offspring of fairies and elves. They were shunned and never accepted. When the fairies found a child they wanted to take in as their own, they would kidnap the child and leave the changeling in their place.
Wow.
These children were taken for a multitude of reasons. Some were taken as servants, some to punish the parents who had wronged the fairies, and others were loved and raised as the replacement for the changeling.
Hi, Jenny.
If the changeling was discovered, there were a number of ways one could attempt to have their child returned. Causing the changeling to laugh was one way, and then we have the not-so-subtle approach of torturing the changeling.
Wow.
This was used as a common excuse and explanation for child abuse, especially amongst children who were born with some kind of deformity.
Wow, bro.
It also ties into the idea that taking the changeling into the wilderness to be reclaimed by the fairies may also work. At a time where providing enough food for a household was a struggle for many, every member of that household would have to contribute.
Don't worry about it.
Changelings were seen as having a voracious appetite, as well as several deformities which resulted in a lack of contribution, and so they threatened the family's ability to sustain itself.
Wow.
Thus the close links to child abuse, abandonment, and infant mortality rates.
Woo!
There are also stories of fairies kidnapping adults to marry into their families, and mothers to help raise their fairy children. In these cases, an enchanted log was left behind, which assumed the appearance of the person who had been stolen. Shortly after, this log replacement would become sick and die, forcing the family to bury their lost loved one, none the wiser of the swap that has just occurred. The case of Bridget Cleary is probably the most famous involving a changeling-related murder. The events took place in Ireland, where Bridget had been killed by her husband in 1895, who had then set her body on fire, claiming that she had been taken by the fairies. Bridget had been diagnosed with bronchitis. Her condition was severe enough that she had a priest administer her last rites.
Yes.
Given her sudden illness, Bridget's husband and father accused her of being a fairy.
Technically, those fae are part of British folklore, which a lot of people kind of forget about because it's more, the fact that the Scottish and Irish are focused on more, even though Britain is also the land of Celts too. So that is definitely on the list as well.
Sent to replace the real Bridget. In order to cast out the fairy, Bridget was carried into the fireplace. This was done because in Ireland it was believed that placing a changeling into a fireplace would cause them to jump up the chimney and return the missing person. The changeling story is a sad one, of abandonment and neglect.
And abuse. You forgot abuse.
Leprechauns are most likely a type of fairy you've heard of before.
Yes.
They were seen as mischievous creatures, but they also preferred to act alone. Much of their time was spent making shoes, as most of them were cobblers by trade.
Yep.
Today's leprechauns are fairly close in appearance with just one major difference: the colours worn. The iconic green was actually never a thing prior to the 20th century, before leprechauns would wear red jackets. David Russell McAnally wrote a book titled Irish Wonders, which details all sorts of fairies, ghosts and creatures found in Irish folklore. It was his belief that every mythology had good and evil spirits. To him, the leprechaun was a relic of Ireland's pagan mythology. It was neither wholly good nor entirely evil. His take on the leprechaun is by far one of the most detailed I've come across. By birth, the leprechaun is of low descent, his father being an evil spirit and his mother a degenerate fairy. By nature, he is a mischief maker, the Puck of the Emerald Isle. He is of diminutive size, about 3 feet high, and is dressed in a little red jacket, with red breeches buckled at the knee, grey or black stockings, and a hat in the style of a century ago, over a little old withered face. He also goes on to say that fairies who live in large groups wear the colour green, whereas solitary fairies such as leprechauns prefer red. If you were able to physically catch a leprechaun, they were compelled to show you the location of their gold, which was buried in mounds of dirt. However, they had plenty of tricks along the way. In one story, a farmer caught a leprechaun and demanded he take him to his gold. The leprechaun did so that night. However, when the farmer ordered him to start digging, he pleaded to let him go because he had no spade. He was no use to the farmer at this point, as he already knew where the gold was. The leprechaun took a stick and placed it into the mud and then threw his hat on top. The spot has been marked. You can come back with a spade and take all of the gold for yourself. Now please let me go. Satisfied, the farmer let the leprechaun go, and returned the next morning with a spade ready to dig up the gold. However, the farmer returned to a bog full of sticks and hats placed on top of them. Finding the gold now would take forever. He had been well and truly outsmarted. McAnally also mentions that leprechauns avoid friendships with other fairies, and have no interest in marriage or family. Some stories point to this being because they were exiled, and others merely believe that leprechauns just prefer to be alone. Remaining on the topic of solitary house fairies, we have the boggarts and brownies. When everybody in the house is asleep, the brownie will come out and perform various tasks and chores. In return for their service, they ask for an offering of some kind. This was normally food and drink, with brownies having a particular taste for cake, milk, and cream. Similar to the brownie, you have the hobgoblin, which was also seen as a helpful house spirit. Brownies were seen as a sign of prosperity for the household they inhabit, but they were also notorious for their unpredictable temperament. They were extremely easy to upset. Something as harmless as moving the broom or changing their surroundings can leave them in a fit of rage. If they are not calmed down or appeased, they will leave the house and look for another. This is actually the best scenario, because the alternative is the brownie becomes a boggart. Essentially an evil brownie. They cause chaos around the house. They steal and move things around. They mess with pets and cause milk to sour. They even jump into your bed to pull on your ears and just behave like creepy weirdos. Boggarts will follow families wherever they go, so moving house doesn't solve the problem. Placing a pile of salt outside the door to a room and leaving a horseshoe on the door handle of your front door is said to keep boggarts from entering. Pixies are a type of fairy common in the United Kingdom, particularly in Devon and Cornwall. Some of you may remember the Cornish pixies in Harry Potter. Most pixies were believed to live underground in large mounds and stone circles. For the most part, they were considered harmless and benign, childlike in both stature and demeanour. They were playful and mischievous. A singular pixie was a rare sight, as they often gathered in very large groups, dancing, singing, and playing pranks on nearby humans. There are stories of pixies kidnapping children and punishing humans. However, there are far more that describe them as being fond of humans, especially children and those who meant them no harm. This stretched as far as playing with children, giving them blessings, and even granting them wishes in some fairy tales. The modern depiction of a pixie is a small creature with pointed ears and wings, somewhat elf-like. In the Victorian era, they were depicted as wearing not much more than old rags. However, giving a pixie new clothing was a very good way to make a friend of one. The rise of Christianity in Britain caused stories of pixies to change slightly. Pixies were then explained as being the souls of unbaptized children who had died. Shortly after their funeral, they would change into pixies instead of passing on. They remained in this plane with the same childlike innocence, however they were trapped in pixie limbo. A type of creature that we see in many cultures today takes the form of the Irish Banshee. The Old Irish roughly meaning woman of the fairy mound. Banshees appear as both young and elderly women, their eyes red and sore from the continuous weeping they are known for. The elderly banshees are quite short with a green dress and grey cloak. The more youthful banshees are sometimes rather tall, with red, silver or golden hair, a white dress and a ghostly complexion. A banshee appears when a family member has died. Their screaming or wailing is the first sign. You may already be aware of the situation, but in cases of long distance, the Banshee is always seen as a bearer of bad news.
Yes, it's an ill omen.
A common explanation was that Banshees were the ghosts of young women who had died a brutal death. If that woman was mistreated or had a deep hatred for her family, then they would stick around, full of anger, waiting for those they hated to also die. More common are these stories of women who died too early and that had a strong connection to their family, and so they remain or linger to watch over them. The songs of these banshees were much calmer, but were also full of sorrow. This ties to the profession of keening and the term keening woman, which we do see in Scotland and Ireland. Essentially, keening is a way of paying respect to the dead. It is a vocal ritual of sorts performed at wakes and funerals. Some may compare it to singing, however it's not quite the same. There is vocal repetition and rhythm in both voice and movement, but none of this is planned. More importantly, there is also what some would compare to a banshee's wailing. Sometimes banshees would predict a death and appear early. The person whose fate had been predicted may hear the Banshee song days before anyone else. When numerous Banshees were seen in one place, the death was considered to be someone of greater significance than normal. It's fair to say that Banshees aren't considered evil or malicious fairies, but given the circumstances that build up to seeing one, it's understandable why you would rather avoid them. Another commonly held belief is that fairies were once pagan deities. As their belief and worship began to disappear, they were demoted to just mythical beings. The church echoes a similar idea, however fairies in this case were once angels who had been demoted. The story states that during a revolt in heaven, God ordered the gates to be shut. Those inside remained angels, those in hell became demons, and those in between became fairies.
Wow.
Eventually, by the 17th century, the church began to see all fairies as demons. The brownies and hobgoblins, which were once seen as friendly house spirits, were now seen by many as wicked goblins. Even the idea of fairies had become associated with acts of witchcraft, and thus those spreading these stories were punished in a similar way. The idea of fairies being or representing the souls of the dead appears quite often. In both Scotland and Ireland, there is a fairy known as the Slough or Sluch that flies through the air during Halloween.
Oh boy.
This is a cloudy mass largely composed of the souls of the dead, flying together almost like a flock of birds. Pre-Christianity, they were considered some of the most vile members of the unseelie court. Wherever they went, the feeling of hopelessness and sadness followed.
Evil.
Humans would avoid them at all
These ones
costs.
are bad.
The church then gave the Slough a more physical or human description. Rather than fairies, they became the souls of sinners and those who refused to repent. They were cursed to fly through the air together for eternity.
Okay.
Now, as we've seen today, the word fairy is very much a blanket term, used by many cultures to categorize a group of creatures within their folklore. These creatures can have fairly joyous stories, but they can also be part of very tragic tales. If you have any stories of fairies, movies, TV shows, or books where you enjoyed their depiction, feel free to share those in the comments section. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.
I'm just curious about something, so excuse me for this impromptu, but I'm just curious if, let's see, fairy sightings. Let's see if there's like a video just to show something. 9 real fairies, I don't know, a channel called The Magnum. Unexplained Mysteries? Sure, let's watch this real quick, just to see what, you know, these real footage of fairies is. Here we go.
A fairy is a mythical creature that's usually depicted as being small, having a humanoid body, small wings, and in some reports is even able to glow. In recent years though, people have come forward with some interesting photographs that allegedly show these creatures.
I'm ready.
Those that have seen them though have gone on to explain that they aren't physical creatures, but are actually interdimensional.
Small.
This person shared these interesting photographs.
What the fuck is that?
To
That looks like a frog
media.
jumping.
When the woman posted them, many people were interested in what they were. The woman who took the photographs said the following to me:
T-posing.
Please do share the photos. I think it's important for people to know that we have many non-physical beings that surround us with love and guidance. End quote.
Oh, hi Porky, you
After
came just at the right
for a
time.
While,
what is
the woman
that?
went on to say that the reason she can see these is because she's trained in the Gateway program.
The Gateway program? Oh,
Interestingly,
no.
I talked with another person who also
that
said
looks like
they
a
have
frog
this ability.
Jumping or something. I don't know what that is.
They went on to detail that it allows them to see these types of creatures, and that they're more in touch with things that most people can't see.
Okay.
They said the following:
that is a fucking gingerbread man
myself,
in the sky.
I've been able
what
to
is
see
that?
What these things are. I've pointed them out to friends and family, and they've said they can't see anything.
What am I looking at?
However, when I take photographs of them, they show up on the images. I'm not sure what this is. Perhaps
this
cameras
looks like it's
are
taken
able
from
to
like
pick
a
up on
movie
things
clip.
that
I don't
the
know
human
what
eye
this is.
can't. I've been training myself for many years now, and it's definitely something that everyday people can't do.
A balloon is my... I guess.
It allows you to see some
this
of the
looks like a
incredible
frog.
things
It's
around
on
us.
grass or something.
Most
Or
importantly,
maybe it's a...
though, this
I don't know
thing
what
is real.
maybe it's a fucking
And if trained
grasshopper
properly,
jumping.
many
It's something
people can
in
do
motion.
it.
I can't tell what it's in
End
motion,
quote.
but it's there.
When you hear about these kinds of things, it can be easy to dismiss them.
Yeah, this maybe is a balloon.
But the Central Intelligence Agency have shown that they're
The
very
CIA?
much interested in individuals who are able to do these kinds of things.
Wait. Go back. What was that?
When you hear about these kinds of things, it can be easy to dismiss them. But the Central Intelligence Agency have shown that they're very much interested in individuals.
The CIA? is interested in fairies? What? What? They glow in the dark?
Who are able to do these kinds of things.
It is glowing? Oh my god.
For those unaware,
tell me
a recently declassified document was released that showed an interesting government experiment.
MK Ultra?
It surrounds the training of psychic soldiers.
Oh
and enhancements to the brain known as the Gateway Process Experience Experiments.
Run them over?
The declassified document titled Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process seems to be a written memo between a US Army researcher and the CIA
must be
sent to a US Army operational commander located out of Fort Meade.
Fort Meade? Oh no.
The subject of the memo seems to have been the analysis surrounding the legitimacy of the Gateway Process study.
Oh no.
Most likely the US government was unaware of what the Gateway Process really entailed, and so sent an independent researcher to the experimentation areas to undergo the process.
Oh my god, Chet, you're on
and learn if there was any legitimacy to the study in the first place for continued funding. The document then goes into the breakdown of what the Gateway Process holds, with the first explanation from the researcher being in regards to the human body's natural frequency of the brain, and the frequency following response.
Oh, lungs hurt.
According to the study, a form of enlightenment can be triggered in a person's mind when both hemispheres of the brain begin operating at the same frequency, allowing them to communicate without any form of distraction and leading to a heightened state of focus.
Okay.
Although it requires a number of different techniques to reach this state, the main contributing factor in the study was a device that relied on the human's body's natural frequency following response. Additional techniques for reaching the syncing of the hemispheres included assisted hypnosis from a psychologist, as well as techniques that match transcendental meditation practices, with a note stating that gurus who have practiced this meditation practice for 20 years have the ability to reach a hemisphere sync for up to 15 minutes at a time without any form of assistance. According to the document, this training lasts around 7 days before a person is capable of reaching a hemisphere sync, and is capable of furthering the study with tasks related in skill to the Gateway Process experience techniques.
Okay.
The researcher writing the document then notes that this is typically where the training and ability of most of the subjects end up, and that less than 5% of the participants are able to move past these skills, and into the realm of impossible to understand psychic abilities. The last and most advanced of all the focus states associated with the Gateway training program involves movements outside the boundaries of time and space, but with attention to discovering the future rather than the past. The individual who has achieved this state has reached a truly advanced level.
I don't know how to feel about any of this. What happened to just fairy pictures, my guy? Why did we go down this rabbit hole of the CIA opening my mind?
And then goes on to suggest a 12-step plan as to how to provide the Gateway training to all members of the organization.
I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Although the document fails to elaborate on the finding, the memo then states that the training could open up members of the Gateway Process to be attacked by intelligent energy beings, if the boundaries of time and space are continually surpassed. Stating in quotes, subjects must be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. The fact that the CIA have invested money into people who have this ability is interesting.
Glow in the dark,
Those who have practiced alternative theories and who have worked on their brain have said these things are doable.
How did we get here?
The document went on to say that individuals who have practiced this can be used to gather information from such entities and universal consciousness.
Gasp of surprise shock did something somewhere where I didn't want it to do it.
So what do you make of these photographs?
Well, now we go back to the photographs after everything else?
Or do you think they show everyday creatures?
We can't go back now.
It's saying that subjects must be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded.
We are not capable of going back now, my guy. You have fucked us.
And help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries.
No, I'm not gonna like and subscribe. I did share your content though. I hope you appreciate that. This year-old content. Alright. we're moving on past this now. Let's go back to some Banshee stuff, because I'll feel more comfortable there. Let me just be sure of something. The Kelpie? But wait, the Kelpie's the horse. Why is there a woman? I'm confused. I guess we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Because apparently the Kelpie thing has a woman in it. I don't know why. Let's take a look.
The British Isles are filled with rich history, culture, and more than a few creatures of legend. Celtic myth and legend of Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales tell of all manner of strange creatures hiding in the forests and fields, lurking in caves and waterways, and some hiding in the attic or beneath the floorboards of residences.
Okay.
Some beautiful, others hideous. Some dangerous, others mischievous. This program will detail some of the most famous monsters of mythology and folklore of Scotland, Ireland, England, and Wales.
Okay.
Our first monster comes from Irish folklore.
Alright.
A creature known as the Darug Dua.
Oh no, the Darug Dug. Okay.
The Darug Dua,
it's a vampire, I guess.
Resembles a beautiful young woman who seduces men before
killing them. I saw Kelpie, and that's why I skipped over this. I didn't know there's a Darug Dug.
Not unlike the common vampire or a succubus.
Well, they could be both, can't it?
According to the legend,
they're still sucking on you.
A woman of Waterford, known throughout the countryside for her beauty, fell in love with a local peasant.
Oh, what a mistake
that
was.
But her father would not allow them to wed. Her father instead arranged for her to marry a wealthy man who abused her in every way imaginable.
Well, of course.
In time, her grief became too much, and she killed herself.
Oh. Well, that's not very
She was buried
holy.
Near Strongbow's tree in Waterford, her abusive husband having already found someone new. But one night,
she
rose from her grave to seek revenge on her father and husband,
sucking
their blood.
Oh, that influenced Bram Stoker to come up with Dracula. Okay, the Dracula Dug.
All right. Dead. The Darug Dua is a frightening figure, whose legend reminds us all that the evil one creates will ultimately destroy them.
Oh, of course. Okay, now I move past the Kelpie, because the Kelpie doesn't matter. Yeah, we can see this thing. What is this? The puka.
The puka loves to terrify people.
It's not a woman, but I'm just curious.
To engage in conversation with them.
It's a fucking rabbit.
The puka may even divulge wise
fix
words
her.
and advice to its conversation partner.
What is this? It's like a
But with any mystical
rabbit
creature,
monkey.
One must always be wary. Namely, when the creature is a trickster by nature.
Oh, okay. So don't trust it. Oh.
Hailing from Arthurian legend.
We'll just move past that and go to the questing beast, which is this horrible chimera of a thing. We don't need to hear about that, because that's not what the show is about tonight. Let's hear about the Banshee. Okay, was that the Banshee whale?
The Banshee is a female...
Go back. Okay, the questing beast doesn't matter.
Perhaps the most famous spirit of Celtic legend is the Banshee.
Oh, that's a squeal.
The Banshee is a female omen of death from folklore of Ireland and Scotland. More often heard rather than seen.
Well, that's
the Banshee is described as a non-corporeal being resembling a human woman adorned in grey robes. Sometimes she is a beautiful young maiden, sometimes a middle-aged matron,
and other times
other times as a fragile old woman with flowing white hair.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say
hag. She attaches herself to a family and manifests
like
to herald an approaching death in the family. The Banshee's warning comes in the form of a haunting cry, whether it be a low wailing to signify a peaceful passing, or an ear-splitting scream.
Women should be seen, not heard. Death. Wow. Listen to Strog over here.
Are almost always heard at night, and are said to sound like a blend between a woman's scream and the cry of an owl. It is said that if a person hears the wail of a banshee,
that's a terrifying artwork.
Then someone close to them, or perhaps they themselves, will
Strog, then why are you speaking?
There are old tales of soldiers abandoning their posts after hearing wailing in the woods prior to engaging their enemies in combat. terrified by the thought of the Banshee signaling their impending
The Banshee
death,
is also known as the Bensei, the
flee.
Bennej, or the Little Washer by the Fjord, the latter term stemming from the belief that she may signal a person's imminent and violent death by washing their blood-stained grave clothes in the stream. Oh no. She washes the fucking violent clothes in the stream after they're dead. Wow.
Deserters would usually be killed by their enemies, their own armies for desertion, or simply by the elements if they stayed in hiding. And with every death,
that's scary. I'm scared now. Also,
grow.
Chet, I'm not happy the fact that it's,
from counties all along the English-Scottish
nothing to do with the stream, but I gotta do it anyways. I'm upset, personally, because it decided to snow really heavily today, and it didn't snow this hard during all of, December, right? There's just snow, piles of it outside now. Just 'cause. Why you gotta be like this? Huh, winter? Why you gotta be weird like this? You wait till March to dump everything? Also, let's look about it to Holland, because sometimes these can be women, too.
Among the most chilling of Celtic creatures is a dark fairy called the Dullahan.
The Dullahan, Dullahan,
also
whatever.
Called the Gunkian, Fardarocha, or Durahan, and theorized to be the demonic embodiment of the Celtic god Crondu. The Dullahan rides on Irish festival nights with a tattered
missing its
dark
head
cloak
sometimes. Other times
a powerful
it has it.
black stallion.
Porky, fake.
In one hand,
in
he
some
carries
stories, the Dullahan drives a black coach
whip,
called the Coish Bihar,
and
bound to the warm-chewed paw and human flesh, constructed of human bones, decorated with candles made of human skulls. The coach is drawn by 6 horses galloping so fast they set the hedgerow. Oh, the hedgerows alight. Oh no, your hedgerows. You worked really hard on those.
Together, he carries his grim, grinning head. He will lift his head up high so he may see for miles and miles.
It could be a she too.
When he stops,
I've seen it plenty
he will
times
call
as a
out
woman.
a person's name, drawing out their soul. Once the person's name is called, they are doomed to be spirited away to the other world by this frightful specter. Anyone who witnesses the Dullahan may have blood flung in their eyes to blind them, or may simply die of fright.
Yeah.
No man-made barrier is capable of stopping the Dullahan's charge. Though in some legend, the Dullahan can be held at bay when a gold object is thrown in his path.
Why? Why does it need a gold object?
Another horseman demon, hailing from Celtic legend, is the Nucalavi.
Oh, I know about this one. We've heard this one before. We're going to hear again.
Is a sea demon in the shape of a skinless man.
I know. Let's move on just to see. The Bargust, a Loch Ness Monster. We're good. I think we've learned all the female ones we can have here. Is that St. Patrick? Oh, God. Anyway, look, we got Dankula.
With our Celtic Myth series, we're going to look at another major one. One that has found its way into pretty much every single part of supernatural pop culture. A creature where even just its scream can cause terrible things to happen.
This has been for a while ago, too.
Banshees.
Banshees. Spooked. I'm spooked. Stop spooking me. Scared. Stop it. Muhammad, don't trust him.
But before we get into it, this video was brought to you by Displate.
Oh, wow.
With millions of officially licensed designs to choose from, Displate has a high quality metal 99% off of 3 or more displays, and with every displate you purchase, a tree is planted. This offer is only available for a limited time, so make sure you get in there fast.
Titles.
The name Banshee means woman of the fairy mound, or fairy woman, because banshees are exclusively female. They are ghost-like creatures that would usually appear as thin, emaciated women with a death-like pale complexion. And in most stories, they have long hair and are usually wearing a cloak over a tattered dress.
That's not what he
meant.
And
also, Their eyes are red and bloodshot from their constant weeping and crying.
They do whine.
Like I said, exclusively female. Some of the descriptions do mention specific things like red or silver hair, a grey cloak, or a white or green dress. But, as always with mythology, there are many different variations and descriptions of Banshee. Some believed the Banshee to be a beautiful woman, while others believed them to look gaunt, terrifying, and almost corpse-like in appearance. Other stories claimed that they were headless, naked from the waist up, and would be carrying a bowl of blood.
Wow.
Sometimes they were described just like a classic witch, as a scary, mysterious old woman that lived alone somewhere in the woods. Another thing is, normal human women who were thought to have the gift of premonition were sometimes called Banshee as an insult.
Oh.
Many people believed that a Banshee was created whenever a woman died a brutal death, mostly through murder, which would be a reasonable cause, but during this time period there were very many other horrific ways to die. Yeah. You know, like illness, starvation, mauled by wild animals.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, even the fucking weather. Yep. Historians have traced some of the first stories of banshees to the 8th century, which were based on an old tradition where women would sing sorrowful songs to mourn someone's death. These women were known as keeners, and since they would often accept alcohol as payment for their song, they were branded as sinners that would be punished after death, doomed to become banshees. Now, most legends say that banshees don't actually cause death,
no, they don't.
as in they don't directly kill people, but instead they serve as a warning of death, an omen. Though some other legends have talked about some types of banshees luring and killing their victims. Banshees were thought to completely avoid human contact, and they were very rarely seen.
Okay.
Only heard.
Oh.
But others believed that coming across a banshee in close proximity was extremely dangerous and even fatal. In some tales, banshees were said to be able to paralyse their victims, either through their touch, which was described as being as cold as ice, or with their scream, which was thought to be so loud that it would perforate the victim's eardrums and in some cases even crack their skull.
Wow.
Though that's is the extreme end of the belief, and that should be taken with a pinch of salt, because according to most other versions of the mythology, if spotted, a banshee would just simply vanish, usually into a cloud of mist, which created a noise similar to birds flapping their wings.
Wow.
Banshees were mostly just seen as omens or messengers of death. If you saw one, even from a distance, or if you heard it scream, that would mean that your death was very near, or the death of someone you love. Though banshees were most often heard and not seen.
Yes.
Another thing about the banshee's screaming omen of death is only the people that the omen was for could actually hear it. No one else could. So, if you were all gathered around the campfire and one guy says, "Did any of you just hear that scream?" and none of you heard anything, well, you were all fine.
He's dead.
He's fucked, though. Yeah, it was also believed that banshees were possibly the descendants or servants of one of the Celtic gods, the Morrigan. The Celtic goddess of kings, sovereignty, war, and fate.
Yeah,
and
Morrigan.
She was the harbinger of either defeat or victory in battle. A common goddess for soldiers to worship, which is why so many soldiers believed in banshees. There are old tales of battles being completely abandoned by soldiers because they heard the distant wailing of a banshee just before a battle. The soldiers knew that this was an omen of death, and they were most likely marching to their graves. Some of the soldiers were so scared that they would break rank, desert, and start retreating. Though it was a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, since fleeing soldiers would usually just be killed by their enemies who would take advantage of the disarray, or by their own armies for desertion, or simply by the elements since they ran away from the food supplies and warm tents that armies bring with them on the march. Yeah. And of course, that's what would with every soldier's death, the legend of the Banshee would grow.
Of course.
Also, as for the Morrigan, we can learn more about her later, since all of the Celtic gods will be getting their own videos.
Oh, shit.
But despite all of the fear, apparently Banshees were not all horror-inducing, hateful creatures.
He does have some of them one guy,
had
but that's
very
the
strong
god
ties
of the,
and loyalties
to
their families
that
they had in life, and they would continue to watch over them after death. When seen, one of these types of banshees would appear as a beautiful woman that sang a mournful, haunting song, which was filled with concern and love for their families. This song could be heard a few days before the death of a family member, but in most cases, the song could only be heard by the person who was due to die. People would obviously still be terrified if they ever saw or heard one of these banshees, but apparently this banshee would give off a very non-threatening vibe. You know, still absolutely fucking terrifying, but not dangerous.
Yeah.
But then there was the bad kind of banshee. The ones that were filled with pure anger and hatred. These women were thought to despise their families in life for reasons known only to them. And after death, they would haunt their own family.
The shit out of them.
And they would appear as distorted and frightening apparitions. The howls and shrieks of these banshees were said to be less of a sad, somber warning to the family members,
more like I'm gonna fucking kill you.
They were celebrating and reveling in the fact that someone in the family was about to die. No one is 100% sure where banshees get their knowledge of a person's death from. One theory suggests that each family member has their own personal observer or guardian who would follow them around for their entire lives and then report back to the banshee. It may also be why banshees were sometimes thought of as fallen angels or lost souls, but we can just put all of that down to yet more Christianization of pagan beliefs.
That's true.
Centuries ago, belief in banshees was a lot more widespread and embedded in the culture of Ireland and Scotland, and being a disbeliever was seen to be blasphemous. If you said that you didn't believe in banshees, that was seen as you tempting fate, and you would draw their anger, because after all, banshees are agents of fate. And even today, there are still a lot of old people who still believe in banshees.
Yes, they do.
Back off, you spooky bitch!
In Ireland, tradition stated that the banshee could only cry for 5 major Irish families. The O'Neills, the O'Briens, the O'Connors, the O'Gradys, and the Kavanaghs. But as time has gone on, there have been many stories and sightings of banshees outside of these family groups. While the banshee is traditionally an Irish ghost, the banshee is also very well known throughout Scotland and also even further south in Welsh mythology as well.
Of course.
The myths of these banshees also migrated to the United States, following the immigrant families as they made their way from Ireland and Scotland.
There's a bunch
there are even numerous legends of banshee-like apparitions along the Tar River Valley in South Carolina.
Ooh, South Carolina banshees.
Appalachian folklore contains a number of examples of banshees appearing in the woods and hollows of the mountains. In Scotland, one variation of the banshee is named Ben-Nia, which means something close to fairy washerwoman or the laundress. Yet, the Irish banshee and the Ben-Nia are 2 very different creatures. According to a folklorist in Scotland in the latter half of the 19th century, a man named John Gregerson Campbell, for as much as you can trust a Campbell, he said that a Banshee refers to any otherworld woman, but the Ben-Nia is a specific kind of otherworld woman.
Ooh.
The Ben-Nia is a far more horrific creature, described as having one nostril, one big protruding tooth, webbed feet, long saggy breasts, and is usually seen dressed in green. Known as the Washer at the Ford, these creatures are found wandering near deserted streams where they wash the blood from the grave clothes of those who are about to die. Ben-Nia are thought to be women who died during childbirth, and they are doomed to be washerwomen until the day their lives would have naturally ended had they lived. Now, here comes a little bit of a weird part.
Okay, go on.
Apparently, if you see a Ben-Nia, and she hasn't noticed you yet, if you sneak up to her while she is washing the clothes, and you start sucking on her big saggy tit, it tricks the Ben-Nia into thinking that you are its child, the one that it never got to embrace because it died giving birth to you. At which point, the Ben-Nia will grant you a wish.
What the fuck?
I know, mythology's fucking weird sometimes, but don't let that hold you back. Get out there and suck on the big old wishing titty. However, I do have to imagine there must have been so many grandmothers during that time period who had some very unfortunate experiences at the river when they were just trying to wash their fucking clothes. Another kind of Highland Banshee is known as the Quinniach, which means the Weeper. These types of Banshee are normally invisible and they foretell deaths for the clan that they belong to in life. Though not by shrieking or singing songs, but by
I can't get over that last one. My mind is just like, why?
Very loudly. They are mostly noted as being seen at night near waterfalls, streams, lochs, or in a glen. There are many differences between the Ben-Nia and the Quinniach. Not only in appearance, but the Quinniach cannot be approached or questioned or be made to grant wishes. So please do not try to suck its titty. You couldn't anyway, because as soon as you try to approach a Quinniach, it just disappears. The Quinniach apparently foretold the deaths of those killed in battle. Parents whose sons were at war knew that if they heard the wailing of the Quinniach, it meant that their sons had died in battle. Also, as we have covered in another video, before the massacre of Glencoe, the MacDonalds of Glencoe could hear their clan's Quinniach wailing for several nights all throughout the glen in the lead up to the massacre. Some MacDonalds took the warning for what it was and left the glen immediately, escaping the fate of those who stayed behind. There is a poem left behind mentioning the Quinniach of the Glencoe massacre, which reads as follows. Little Quinniach of the sorrow is pouring the tears of her eyes, weeping and wailing the fate of Clandonald. Alas, my grief, ye did not hear her cries. There is gloom and grief in the mount of mist. There is weeping and calling in the mount of mist. There is death and danger. There is maul and murder. There is blood spilling in the mount of mist. Shrieks from the forest are obviously terrifying. Even if you aren't superstitious at all, hearing a shriek coming from a forest at night, you're still going to shit your pants. If you have ever been in a wooded area at night, a lot of people become very hyper-aware of every sound, sometimes feeling like they are being followed when no one else is around, with your fight or flight waiting to kick in. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you hear a woman screaming. That would freak anyone out. But I have a feeling that I know what the culprit is. Now, there is a lot of speculation as to what could have caused the banshee screams that people have reported hearing throughout history. And some people have said that it possibly could be the shrieks of an owl. But I've got another theory.
Ooh,
and the reason I have this theory is because I have witnessed firsthand people freaking out over this noise and thinking it was a woman screaming. There have been many, many times where me and other people have been fishing or camping, or I've been out in the garden at night with my wife, and then suddenly, from the woods, you hear something like this.
That's a bird. That is a bird. What kind of bird, though? Yep. What type of bird is that? Is it a crane? What the? That's annoying. That's an annoying ass bird.
And far too many times I've seen people hearing that noise and then freaking out and going, "Oh my god, what the fuck is that?" Even my own wife several times thought that a woman was being murdered in the forest. I've even seen videos online of people filming outside their window and recording these spooky and scary noises in the night, and then Facebook mums in the comments going, "Oh my god, what the fuck is that?" It's foxes.
Oh, those are foxes?
That's the
that
noise
was a fox?
Foxes make.
That was a fox? Oh, Jesus. Wow, you yipey little bastards. Wow. I didn't know foxes made these noises. What does the fox make?
Ever since the baby was born, I smoke outside.
So now we know. See, now we know. That's the noise the fox makes for that age-old meme. What does the fox say? That terrifying noise. There you go.
And sometimes I stay up late, so I hear these noises all the time. And even though the noises are
fucking
not very
terrifying.
exact, sometimes I hear a fox call that makes me think, "Oh, fucking hell, that actually does sound like a woman screaming."
Fucking foxes.
But it's just a fox. However, imagine back in the day when soldiers and regular people were superstitious as fuck, and they fully believed in banshees. And then they hear something like that.
Yeah.
I can kind of get why they got freaked out.
Yeah.
So you have nothing to worry about. Those noises that you hear coming from the woods at night are just foxes, alerting each other to danger, calling out to their cubs, or just fighting with each other.
Fucking foxes. But, well.
At least, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Oh.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube.
There's Alex Jones. Super dry. Beautiful. Alright. Moving on to our next video we have here. We got this Banshee horror story from Into the Dark. The Banshee took them. Banshee ghost stories. Go.
Banshee story number 1. The night was young and full of promise. My friends and I had decided to spend our evening drinking on a dock by the lake to celebrate our recent graduation. The warm summer air enveloped us as we laughed and joked around, swimming, sharing stories, and making memories. Not knowing that this night would leave us with a memory we would never forget. As the night grew darker, we became more carefree, and the drinks flowed more freely. We were all lost in the moment, enjoying each other's company, and reveling in the beauty of the night. But then, something strange happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman standing on the water. She was pale, with long flowing hair.
I'm going to show
and
this
eyes
too. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to pause it. See, subscribe's right under there.
to pierce through the darkness.
I like the visual effects.
I rubbed my eyes, thinking that it was just the alcohol playing tricks on my mind. But when I looked back, she was still there. My friend Ellie also noticed her. She was standing far enough out from any light source that we could barely make her out. But there she was, standing on top of the water. She was standing in a spot where there was no docks, rocks, or shoreline to stand on.
Wow.
We started to freak out trying to get the others' attention to look at her as well. But before we could get them to swim over and look, she vanished into thin air. We were all unnerved, but we quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light and continued our revelry. It wasn't until later that we realized that our friend Jonathan was missing. We searched frantically for him, but he was nowhere to be found. We called out his name, but the only response we got was the sound of the water lapping against the dock. As the realization dawned on us, we all felt a sense of dread. We knew that something terrible had happened, and our worst fears were confirmed when the authorities pulled John's lifeless body from the lake the next morning. He had drowned that night. We never forgot that night, and Ellie, and I never forgot the woman we saw standing on the water, and we couldn't shake the feeling that her appearance was somehow connected to Jonathan's tragic end. Banshee story number 2. I was lying in my hospital bed, feeling weak and helpless. Cancer had taken its toll on my body, but I was grateful to still be alive.
Wow.
I was sharing a room with another patient, an elderly man who was much sicker than I was.
Oof.
One night, I heard a strange sound coming from the other side of the room.
Uh-oh.
It was a woman's voice, wailing and screaming in agony. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I realized that the other patient was hearing it too.
Ooh.
He was frantically covering his ears and tossing around,
wow,
trying to block out the sound. The wailing continued for what seemed like hours, getting louder and more intense with each passing moment. It sounded like it was coming from just outside the door, then it moved closer, until it sounded like it was right next to us. I called out for the nurse, but when she came in, she couldn't hear anything. The doctors and nurses tried to reassure us that everything was okay, but the wailing continued, driving us both to the brink of madness.
Wow.
In the end, the doctors had to sedate the other patient to calm him down. The wailing stopped, but I couldn't stop thinking about where it had come from. It was as if the screams had come from some unknown source, and it was strange that the doctors and nurses hadn't heard them. The next morning, I woke up to find that the other patient had passed away during the night.
Oh.
I was devastated, but I couldn't help feeling that the wailing we had heard was somehow connected to his passing.
Yeah,
I never forgot that night, and the memory of those blood-curdling screams stayed with me for years to come.
Spooky.
I couldn't explain where they had come from or why only the other patient.
Gina's a cryptid. I mean, probably.
Banshee story number 3.
I'm not gonna, confirm or deny anything, but I am probably a cryptid. That's probably true.
This is a story my dad told
not.
me of his first
I'll
hand
let you
experience.
decide.
Short and sweet, so it is. My dad was 19 at the time with 2 other mates. They drove to some pub in a rural town.
What?
One mate was called Bert. Bert had said,
"Oh, Jesus.
I don't feel too good tonight.
Oh my
I'll just
God,
stay in the
did
car
you
for
make
a bit."
that?
So my dad
I'm
and his other
scared
mate
now.
went
What?
into the pub.
Now I'm really scared.
This was around
What?
9 p.m.
Did you make that?
After getting drunk and forgetting about Bert being left in the car for some time.
Wow.
My dad went out at around 11
Wow.
p.m. to check on him.
I'm
He
just-
looked in and Bert
yeah, I'm just gonna put
was in the
wow.
middle back seat, when previously he
Holy
was sitting in the
shit.
front seat. Bert was sitting up straight, tears streaming down his face, and he
Wow.
seemed to be in a trance-like state with a pale face. My dad tried
Weeb's
to
a
open
Polish
the door,
cryptid? Oh,
but it was
boy.
locked. He tried to snap him out of the trance, saying firmly, "Bert, unlock the door."
The logger
Bert opened
loony,
the
the
doors and
mysterious being who
immediately
steals
said,
IPAs and smokes
you
all
hear
your
that?"
granddad's cigars.
"Hear what?" My
That's
dad
good.
said. Bert quickly replied, "Take me home."
Porky
Not breaking
is the
his stare out the windshield.
Congolese cryptid.
So they drove home.
The Pollock's
Bert not
Bacchus.
saying
No,
a word.
Porky's the Gumbaroo.
My
That
dad
is
asked
an
him what
actual
happened,
cryptid from Oregon
Bert
that
wouldn't
is
reply.
pig-like. The
So he just dropped
Gumbaroo.
him home and Bert just left without saying
We've
a word.
covered it before when it was
The next day, my
cryptids
dad's
of
other
Oregon.
friend asked Bert why he was freaked the
And
night
Porky is
before.
the Gumbaroo.
He said that this black figure of a woman stood in front of the car, came flying up to the windshield face to face with him, and let out a deathly scream, with an open mouth, so large it was unhuman, with
He
an empty
gums your
blackness and
baroo.
terrifying eyes,
Yeah.
just staring at him, then flew
Fearsome
off.
critters that are part of that
He moved
logging
seats to feel
mythology.
less exposed. But later found out that his uncle was pronounced dead around 11 p.m.
Wow, the
at
Banshee
night too.
pronounces death. I can't believe it, except I can, because these are all Banshee stories. Alright, there's that. Next, we have the Maggy Moulach. Here we go, let's listen to Dankula talk about it.
Evil creatures, and we have another one for you today. But what makes this one different is it only becomes evil after you do something bad to it. Brownies are very helpful creatures as long as you treat them with
back to brownies.
respect. But if you do something bad to them, then they can become a little bit mischievous. And if you do something really bad to them, then they turn into a horrible creature called a boggart. And one of the worst ever boggarts was Maggy Moulach.
Maggy Moulach. Spooked. There's the Kelpie.
But before we get into the video, it's time to clean yourself up.
With what? Oh, Manscaped.
Manscaped.
Yep.
This video was brought to you by Manscaped.com, the global brand for men's grooming and hygiene products.
Use code DANKULA for Manscaped to get products
Always use the right tool for the job. Before we start on who Maggy Moulach is, we must first understand what a brownie is. A brownie, or bruni, is a house spirit that came out at night once everyone was sleeping. They performed housework and farming and other tasks for the owners, but not for free. The owners would have to leave an offering for the bruni, usually by the hearth, and an offering could be anything from a bowl of milk, a bowl of cream, or various other food items. So long as the owner respected them enough to leave an offering, the brunies would happily do the work. If, however, the owner didn't leave an offering or disrespected and mistreated the bruni in some way, then they can become offended very easily, and in the best case scenario, they would simply just leave the home and go find another home where they were respected. In the worst case scenario, they would turn into an evil version of themselves called a boggart, which has many other different names, including the boogeyman. If the bruni existed to make your life easier and happier, then the boggart was the complete opposite. They exist to make your life a living hell, since they are naturally mischievous and they would constantly pull pranks to punish those who had wronged and offended them. And depending on how much you did offend them, the greater and darker the punishment would be. Boggarts would do things such as spoiling food and milk, making animals lame, or sometimes even just killing the farm animals. But there was like a spectrum. For example, if you just annoyed the bruni a little bit, it might not transform and just do something a little bit cheeky like hide your car keys. However, if you did something really, really bad, then it would turn into a boggart and it might just trip you up while you're going down the stairs. And once your bruni had turned into a boggart, there was no way to get rid of it. A boggart would follow homeowners wherever they ran, even if they moved house. In those days, the death of farm animals, crops, and the spoiling of stored food was an extremely major thing that could mean the difference between life and death. Some boggarts were said to even live in marshland or muddy holes in the ground, and those kinds of boggarts were the worst ones because they were known for kidnapping children.
Ooh, spooky.
Boggarts could take on many different forms, and throughout history there is no definitive description of what a bruni or a boggart actually looks like, except that they are similar to poltergeists, extremely physically strong, ugly in appearance, and they can be smelled before they are seen. Brunies are usually described as being ugly with brown skin, and their bodies are very hairy. You know, think of the goblins from the movie Labyrinth. But they were always very, very friendly as long as you were friendly to them. And this description describes Maggy Moulach perfectly because she was brown-skinned, she was 2 feet tall, and she was extremely hairy, which gave her the nickname Hairy Meg. And while she and the other brunies were described as being short, there is some speculation as to the true height of brunies, with some people believing that they could have been human-sized or sometimes even bigger than us. Maggy Moulach lived with her son named Bruni Claude, and they both lived at Tullochgorn Castle and served the owners, who were the Grant family. Maggy had extra duties to that of an ordinary brownie, which included announcing deaths in the family like a Banshee would, and she was also supposed to teach chess strategies to the clan chief so that he could beat his opponents. Some accounts also say that Maggy Moulach could also shapeshift into a grasshopper, but whether or not she could transform into anything else, we don't actually know. Before Maggy Moulach was living in the castle and serving the Grant family, she lived on a farm, and Maggy was so good at the work that the owner fired every single one of his farmhands and gave all of the work to Maggy. But after some time, the farmer realised that he could exploit Maggy more to make some extra coin, which he really didn't need since he didn't even have any farmhands to pay.
Wow.
Maggy, however, was not stupid. She knew she was being taken advantage of, and she knew that she wasn't getting fair pay for the amount of work she was doing. So she just stopped doing all of the work and instead decided to play pranks on the farmer. And the pranks were fairly innocent pranks, but she was very serious about not wanting to serve him anymore. The farmer couldn't get her to go back to work, and he became so annoyed that eventually he just gave up and rehired all of the staff that he had earlier fired. Probably at a higher rate.
Yeah.
Maggy's son, Bruni Claude, was referred to as Adobe, which means that he was generally good-natured and had good intentions, but he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
Oof.
His duty was to guard
dummy.
Finn Castle Mill and scare away any trespassers that might try to enter and steal the flour. Late one evening, a local girl decided to go to Finn Castle Mill to pinch some flour that she desperately needed for a wedding cake. She knew that Bruni Claude defended the mill and that the miller had gone home for the day, so she would have to go in and grind the flour herself, but do it quietly. But before she gets started grinding the flour, the mill door swung open and she was caught by Bruni Claude. Bruni Claude acted cautiously after spotting her, and he asked her slowly what her name was. She responded by saying, "O Ishmisha Mehin," meaning, "Oh, I am me, myself." While Bruni Claude wasn't very smart, he knew that that wasn't her name. So he asked her again, but she just kept repeating, "Mehin," me, myself, until Bruni Claude just gave up asking. Instead, he got annoyed at her for not answering him properly, so he started to close the gap between them. Not to hurt her, but likely in hopes of scaring her out of the mill. However, the girl had boiled some water nearby for the milling process, and she immediately grabbed the bubbling pot and threw the scalding water all over Bruni Claude. He, as you would expect, screamed in agony and called out for his mother Maggy. Eventually, they found each other, and he fell into her arms because his wounds were so severe. She held her weak, burnt son and asked him who had hurt him. And Bruni Claude repeatedly said, "Mehin," me, myself.
Yeah.
Which Maggy assumed meant that he had clumsily but fatally harmed himself. He died in her arms, and while she was still pained by his death, she believed that his burns were self-inflicted. So the girl had tricked two Brunies, and since Brunies were master tricksters themselves, it was really uncommon to trick one, never mind two.
Yep.
Another thing you should know about Brunies. Don't trick them and don't deceive them. They really don't like that.
Yeah.
Another thing that they also really don't like is when you kill one of them.
Yeah.
The girl, however, couldn't keep her mouth shut about what she'd done.
Of course.
And she bragged to the people of the town about how she stood up to Bruni Claude. She believed herself to have freed the mill for the people of the town and defeated the monster that was guarding it. The girl bragged so much that eventually Maggy Moulach overheard her talking through an open window. Maggy became so angry that she started screaming with grief and immediately transformed into a boggart. She changed from being the most helpful, loving house spirit to one of the worst, most vengeful and evil ones. Maggy picked up a stool and launched it with all of her strength. The stool smashed through the window and hit the bragging girl. Maggy had thrown it so hard that it killed the girl on impact. The witnesses in the area fled in fear after seeing what a terrifying boggart Maggy had turned into, and also after seeing her just kill someone. But even after killing the person responsible for her son's death, to Maggy, it wasn't enough.
Nope.
From then on, the people of the town would become fearful at the very mention of her name, because Hairy Meg in her boggart form wanted to severely punish all of the townsfolk, even those who might be deemed innocent. She would strike randomly, bringing her wrath upon the townsfolk, killing anyone that crossed her path, and she would even climb down chimneys to kidnap children from their beds. And even to this day, Maggy Moulach is a story that is told to children because, like very many other of our Celtic tales, it's to teach them very important lessons, or at least frighten them into not doing bad things, or else Maggy Moulach will come and get them. So, the morals of this story are: don't steal things that don't belong to you. Don't hurt things that mean you no harm. Don't take advantage of those who only want to help you. And I believe this is the most important lesson, always be nice to brunies.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody just subscribe.
Alright, next we have this. This is the British legends, creatures, and cryptids that were lost, because a lot of people don't know about them till more recently. This is from Mythology and Fictions Explained Again. Let's take a watch.
Having grown up in the UK, from my experience, myths and folklore are not really something prioritised on the school curriculum. I can remember learning some simple Greek and Egyptian stories, but that's about it really. The vast range of folklore across the British Isles was never really explored. At least not until much later, when you could do your own reading, and you start to see its influences in all sorts of fiction.
I mean, the other
Today
one before
I'll be
that was
focusing on the stories and legends of England, but no need to worry, Wales, Scotland and Ireland are all deserving of their own videos.
Of course.
In store today we have tales of swamp hags, demon dogs, giant slayers, and a pair of hairy hands. Sorry. Murderous, ghostly, hairy hands. There is a difference. Stick around and you may just find out. Before we go any further, a quick word from today's sponsor,
Let's go past that.
Sold, which you clicks. You
Oops,
buy a database so you can expert team investing today by using my link in the description.
Legend class in high school?
It also goes a long way in supporting the channel.
Okay, here we go. First one.
Stories of dangerous spirits and creatures lurking around the lakes and riverbeds across England are fairly common. There is the Grendillo, small green humanoids who stalk the riverbeds for children to drown. There is also Peg Prowler, who does the same thing but disguised as an old hag. But the worst of these is Jenny Greenteeth, who does not discriminate and drowns both the young and the elderly. Jenny is also known as Ginny or Wicked Jenny, and her stories exist predominantly around the north of England, around Liverpool, Lancashire, and the surrounding counties.
I see.
Her name refers to the green tint of her skin and her razor-sharp teeth. The easiest way to describe Jenny is as a river or swamp hag, the bogeyman or bogey woman of the lakes and rivers.
Yes.
Children were warned to stay away from dangerous bodies of water, otherwise Jenny would find them and drag them in. Jenny could blend into her surroundings so well she was essentially invisible to the naked eye.
Yep.
What may seem like an ordinary stagnant pond may have a nightmarish hag waiting under the surface. She was also used as a way to scare children into brushing their teeth. If you didn't keep them clean,
she'd kill Cobra.
Jenny would find you. So brushing your teeth not only helps you avoid cavities and other dental issues, but it may also stop you being drowned by an old hag, who also happens to have horrendous teeth. Absolute hypocrite. Jenny herself is closely associated with bodies of water surrounded and covered by duckweed. which can make the water seem like solid ground and is rather dangerous for anyone, particularly children, who are unaware. Stories like this are the perfect example of folklore and its purpose.
Yeah, but Jenny
yes,
is our
these stories
swamp
can
egg.
be interesting and sometimes scary, but they also have a greater purpose or moral behind them. Our next legend is one you may be familiar with without exactly hearing his story.
Jack the Giant Killer.
The Giant Killer. This is a great one for me because growing up, Jack and the Beanstalk was easily one of my favourite fairy tales.
Is after this.
This story takes place during the reign of King Arthur.
Kind of interesting.
Our main character, Jack, is the son of a Cornish farmer.
Yep.
Jack is smart and strong, destined to be more than just a farmer like his father. Not that there's anything wrong with being a farmer. Jack just wanted something more adventurous. One day he came across the giant Cormoran, who was known to the farmers because of his taste for livestock.
Wow.
He wisely decided against a confrontation. Later, when he went into town, he overheard members in the town hall talking about the giant, and so Jack spoke up, inquiring about what type of reward he would be given. They looked at Jack and scoffed. "The giant's treasure shall be your reward," and so Jack accepted. Knowing he couldn't fight the giant head-on, he took a shovel, a horn, and a pickaxe over to where he last saw Cormoran. During the night, he took the shovel and began to dig a hole. By the morning, he had created a pit trap over 20 feet deep, which he covered with sticks and straw to disguise the hole. He placed himself on one side of the trap and began to blow his horn. With the ground shaking, the giant labored over. "Why are you blowing that horn so loud while I sleep?
Boy,
I'm gonna boil your bones for breakfast." The giant ran towards Jack and fell into the pit trap, leaving only his head exposed. Now with the playing field even, Jack took his pickaxe and killed Cormoran.
Wow.
Shortly after, he found the giant's treasure, and once the town magistrates had heard of his victory, he was dubbed Jack the Giant Slayer and given a sword and a belt.
Wow.
Hearing of Cormoran's demise, another giant, Blunderbore, vowed vengeance against this newly crowned Giant Slayer. Blunderbore was known for kidnapping lords and ladies, eating the men and taking the women for wives. He would eat the husbands in front of the wives, and if they refused to join in on this twisted feast, then he would take them and hang them by their hair in his dungeon until they starved. Not a very pleasant fellow, as you can imagine. Jack, exhausted from his travels, stopped for a drink and a rest at a nearby town. Whilst asleep, unfortunately, Jack is found by Blunderbore, who takes him back to his castle and throws him in his dungeon. Excited about his new find, Blunderbore invited another giant to his castle so they could feast on Jack together.
Eat his bones.
In this time, however, Jack manages to escape the dungeon, and with some rope he fashions 2 nooses.
Wow.
When the giants arrived, he tied the rope to a wooden beam. He then slid down and threw the nooses over the giants. Distracted by the ropes around their necks, Jack was able to swing across and slice their throats with his sword. Jack then freed all of the women being held captive in Blunderbore's castle. In Wales, Jack met a 2-headed giant who offered him a room for the night. However, Jack was weary of the giant's intentions, and so he placed a pile of wood under his bedsheets and left the room.
The
giant, believing Jack was asleep, entered his room, and with his enormous club smashed the bed into pieces.
Not one dude.
Hearing the cracking of the wood, he was convinced he had broken all of Jack's bones, and returned to his room satisfied. The next morning, Jack walked into the giant's room.
Why does the giant have 2 heads?
Him for his hospitality.
Is he deformed? Is he a Siamese twin gone wrong?
Jack was still alive,
I need to know.
He asked him if he felt anything during the night, to which Jack replied, "Merely a rat slapping me with his tail." The giant took offense. On the table were 2 bowls of fresh porridge. Before leaving, Jack challenged him to an eating contest, and the giant accepted. Jack pretended to pour the porridge into his mouth. However, it went straight into a bag inside of his coat pocket. When the giant tried to do the same, the porridge burnt his throat. He then told the giant he could perform a trick that the giant could not possibly copy. He took his knife and stabbed himself in the stomach, slicing open the bag of porridge. The giant, believing Jack had just sliced open his own belly, was sick and tired of being outstaged by him. He took the knife and plunged it into his own stomach, shortly after dropping dead.
Yeah.
Jack had succeeded in making the giant slay himself,
well, good job.
And so he continued on with his journey. Soon after, he came across King Arthur's son, to whom he pledged his servitude.
Okay.
As Jack continued his duties, he would be crowned a Knight of the Round Table, the knight who was known for killing giants. Black Annis, or Black Agnes, is another bogeyman-type figure spoken of in the English Midlands.
Ooh,
Annis was also known as the Cannibal Hag, who lived in a cave in the Dane Hills in Leicestershire. At the base of this cave was a great oak tree that she would hide in, waiting for children to pass by so she could devour them. She was described as an unusually tall, blue-faced hag with long iron claws who feeds off the flesh of children.
Oh no.
Parents would warn their children, if you do not behave, then Black Annis will come for you at night when you lay in your bed.
Man.
At night she stalks the fields, slaying lambs and wearing their skin around her waist, using the branches of oak trees to conceal herself as she ventures closer to nearby houses.
That's not creepy.
She would enter houses through the windows and snatch children away.
Oh, no.
Legend says that houses in Leicestershire were built with smaller windows than usual to make it as hard as possible for Annis to enter.
Oh, okay.
However, she could still reach inside with her long arms. To stop this, households would fasten animal skin across their windows and place witch herbs above and beneath the windows to keep Annis away.
Yes, holy herbs.
Her origin stories are slightly confusing. There are Greek, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian theories all thrown in there, as well as the Celtic mother goddess Anu, also known as Danu. There are some, however, who argue the legend of Annis was inspired by Agnes Scott, a nun who was known for caring for the nearby leper colony. She also lived inside of a cave in the churchyard.
So
Historian Ronald Hutton believes over time her image became distorted into a secluded hag that would be used to scare children into behaving themselves.
Well, I guess that no one would be happy about that.
This modern image was then popularized through a poem written by John Hayrick. "'Tis said the soul of mortal man recoiled to view Black Annis's eyes."
Just so some pockets in there. This just came to mind, since I don't know if you guys know this or not, but only two, at least that I know of, that two animals in the entire world can get leprosy. One of them's us, and the other is armadillos. Yeah, armadillos get leprosy too, chat. Just keep that in mind. They got it from us, by the way.
Vast talons.
They did not have it naturally in the wild. It's because of contact with humans. That's who they got it from.
In place of hands
so that's
and
fun.
Features livid blue. Glared in her visage,
I know
whilst
if you knew
her
that or not.
obscene
There.
waist,
Here's your factoid
warm
for the day.
skins of human
Use it as you
victims
will.
close embraced. Not without terror they the cave survey,
So don't go near armadillos.
where
They
hung
can
the
have
monstrous
leprosy.
trophies of her sway. 'Tis said that in the rock large rooms were found, scooped with her claws beneath the flinty ground. To this day, Black Annis still serves as a bogeyman figure, although the similarity in name to the goddess Anu has caused a moderate amount of interest from Wiccan groups who believe she is the personification of Anu in crone form.
Say it. But yeah, leprosy.
The Black Shuck is one of the many black dogs
We've heard about him before.
hellhounds found across the British Isles.
But we're not listening about
Stories
this anyways.
of the Black Shuck are
because we really just need Jenny Greenteeth and Black Angus. The Jack one was fun to listen to too, because a lot of people don't know that. Anyway, last video for tonight is about the Selkies, which we may have listened to before. Well, about the Selkies and stuff, and the Celtic video. And by that I mean the Celtic stream I did a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Selkies. Let's hear Dankula talk about them, since this is a more recent one. This was uploaded a month ago, actually. So here we go.
Before we get started, just a couple of little announcements to make. Over the next few months, I'm still going to be uploading as much as I usually upload, just the videos are going to be a little bit shorter.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be dropping any 40-minute or over an hour long bad boys. They're all going to be about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to get ahead of time as much as possible because my wife's due date is coming up. And we've got a feeling that the baby's going to be coming a little bit early. My wife is going to have to get a C-section because she's got a little touch of that placenta previa, unfortunately. But that means that obviously my wife is going to be bedridden after such a major operation, and I've got a toddler and a brand new baby to look after. So as you can imagine, you know, maybe a lot of you don't know this, but that can make a man very busy. That's going to be a very, very busy time for me. So the videos are still going to be interesting topics that I've put on the back burner because I like making big videos. So these ones have kind of they've taken a back seat a little bit, so it's still going to be interesting. They're just not going to be the big, massive, epic ones that I usually make because I obviously won't be able to spend so much time in the studio. I'll have to spend it at home because it turns out that children need looking after. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I thought that was her job. But then, because she's had major surgery, that lazy bitch is going to be lying in bed. But I'm just setting your expectations just to let you all know. And obviously, once the baby's born, I'll be taking a little bit of a hiatus, obviously. I mean, you know why. It's going to be a very busy but also magical time, the birth of my second child. And it's not going to be long. I'll be away for like 2 weeks, maybe, because the problem with being self-employed and having a company and having staff is you don't really get the luxury of time off because... things and staff all cost money, so you need to keep bloody working. Also, another thing as well, 1 million subs. 1 million subs. And thank you very much to every single one of you that have subscribed to the channel. And believe it or not,
1 million, the man said it. He's made it in the world, everybody.
YouTube approved me for my gold play button.
Wow.
I thought I was going to have to fight for it. No, just got approved. So I'm waiting on that coming in the mail. So that YouTube play button will be the greatest thing to happen to me this year. Wow. I mean, my daughter being born as well, it's fine. No, I'm not going to be a prick about that. I'm very happy. But yes, now that I've set everyone's expectations and you know what's happening over the next few months, in case you're wondering why I've just disappeared or why the videos are a lot shorter, now you know. Or well, some of you will know, because... unfortunately, not everyone watches the Celtic Myths videos.
I don't know why they're fantastic.
And on that note, it is time for another mythological creature that you would mostly find sitting on the shore. Usually with the appearance of a beautiful woman, but don't let that fool you. Because it's probably for the best that you keep your distance. The Selkie.
Oh, the Selkie. Here we go. I'm already scared.
But before we get started, this video is brought to you by Raycon. With Raycon earbuds, you can greatly enhance your listening experience with incredible quality at half the price of other premium
I'm not getting paid for the ad, you are.
To get an exclusive deal of up to 15% off
the Selkies.
Selkies are a combined mythological creature from Nordic and Celtic folklore, and they are not primarily harmful to humans. We may have talked about it before. In fact, they are mostly beneficial to us. They are also referred to as Kobienta, meaning seal young woman, or Selkvina, meaning seal woman. Others simply call them seal folk or Finn folk. In Scotland, Selkie folklore comes from the Orkney and Shetland Islands, which were settled and inhabited by Norwegians in the year 800.
Norwegians.
While it took a long time, they eventually had a cultural merge with Scotland around the year 1400.
Wow.
Selkies are usually described as being attractive women that can turn into seals. And they do this by wearing seal skins. And they can transform back and forth into a human or a seal by simply taking the skin off and putting it back on.
Wow.
There are also male Selkies, but they seem to be much rarer in folk tales. Some believe that Selkies are never in an in-between state. They are either in their seal form or their human form. And they use their seal forms for travelling long distances, hunting, fishing, and also to hide from humans. It is believed that Selkies live in an ocean paradise on the seafloor, where they use their human forms, something kind of similar to Atlantis.
All right.
Because it is better. Down where it's wetter, naturally. Even though I've just made a Little Mermaid joke, Selkies are not mermaids. But they very often get confused for them. Mermaids
go to the gym and shame men while taking selfies.
Whereas Selkies have a human form and a seal form. Nothing at all to do with fish.
No fish. Seals.
Eating them.
Yeah, they eat fish.
But both Selkies and mermaids can be referred to under the umbrella terms of sea folk or sea maidens. During heavy sea storms in the past, where boats were very often destroyed and shipwrecked,
don't be that way.
Selkies were thought to come to the aid of the fishermen and sailors, helping them to shore when they would otherwise have drowned. However, Selkies would very quickly change their tune if the fishermen or sailors tried to hunt one of them, mistaking them for an actual seal. During hard times, seal blubber was, and still is, a very popular commodity in places with cold climates, to be used for both food and fuel. So seal hunting was very common, but it can be hard to avoid hunting Selkies when they hang around with seals and look exactly like seals. And if a fisherman ever went after a Selkie, it wouldn't end well for him. If a Selkie was injured, then it would hunt the fisherman that had harmed it. And some people even thought that the Selkie could place a curse on the fisherman.
Wow.
The curse would end in various mishaps, but usually always resulted in death. Usually by drowning in the sea, or sometimes falling off a cliff. Selkies were also believed to have the gift of foresight, where they could see the future, but they could never change it. In one old tale that has very many variations, which is pretty much the standard when it comes to mythological stories, a man found a bunch of sealskins laying on the beach.
As
He noticed that nearby there were some very attractive women laughing and bathing in the sea. Having heard the myths of the Selkie, he took one of the sealskins and he hid. Shortly afterwards, the women returned back to the beach. They put their sealskins back on and transformed back into seals. They got in the water and swam away. Except for one of the women whose skin had been stolen. She was left on the beach, very upset since she couldn't find her skin and join her family. The man then approached the Selkie and managed to persuade her to go home with him. After living together for some time, the man and the Selkie ended up getting married and had many children together. The man was very happy with his lot in life, but as for the Selkie, not a single day went by where she didn't wish she could return to the sea and be with her own kind. But she couldn't because her skin was missing.
But
she didn't know that the man was the one who took it, because he hid it from her. In the Icelandic version of this tale, named Selkies, the story is actually a lot darker, and the man actually forces the Selkie into marrying him and essentially makes her a slave. But then one day, one of her children actually found her sealskin hidden in the roof, and the Selkie mother recognised it right away.
Wow.
She immediately snatched it from the hands of the children, said her goodbyes to them, and just abandoned everything.
Wow.
She went straight towards the beach as fast as she could, and she was never seen or heard from again. This is a very common tale in both Nordic and Celtic folklore, though, like with many of the old myths, there are lots of different variations of the story. In one, she actually finds the hidden sealskin herself, but she finds it in a locked chest. Some believe that children that are born from Selkies and humans are not like normal children.
Oh boy,
For example, they apparently have webbed fingers and webbed toes,
wow.
And they sometimes
those kids are mutants,
even have
then.
seal parts or facial seal features.
Wow.
Almost all of the cold northern countries have their own adaptation of this story.
Wow.
The rarest Selkie was the male Selkie, and they were also the most hated by believers, since it was believed they would swim onto the beach during stormy nights and transform into their human form, which would be a peak alpha male sailor that had been shipwrecked. They would then travel to a nearby settlement and knock on each door to ask for food and shelter until someone answered. The real goal of the male Selkie was not to find somewhere cozy to spend the night among the humans, but to seduce the wife or older daughter of whatever family was silly enough to let him in.
What a mistake.
He would then take them back home with him to his home
to
in the
sea.
Some people believe that this arrangement was consensual, but other people believe that the women were taken against their will and under some kind of spell. It was thought that women were magically charmed by them. Male Selkies never stay on land for too long, often returning back to the sea as soon as possible, so they try not to waste too much time to find a woman to take back with them. The kidnapping might have had some truth to it, but it also would have just been easier for a man to cope if he just said his wife had been kidnapped by a Selkie, instead of just admitting that she ran off with a far more attractive sailor. There are a lot of warnings for women in Celtic mythology that are mostly invented to keep them away from more powerful and more attractive men. It was better to play on the woman's superstition than to appear clingy and self-conscious. During the later Christian conversion, it was in the interest of the church to claim that any mythological creature from Celtic paganism either didn't exist or was some kind of demon, and that it was your fault it was tormenting you because you allowed it to or you talked about it too much. Or, in other cases like the Selkie, some Christians believed that they were vessels for condemned souls, former humans that had committed suicide in the sea, or people who had committed sins in life, while others believed that they were fallen angels that could only transform every 7 years. It is believed that Christianity also created some strange traditions to do with the Selkie, even though these could more likely be the traditions of a small community. Whenever a woman would take her daughters by the sea, she and the daughters would all draw crosses on their body, usually on their chest and other areas. Women that thought that their husbands were cheating on them would also threaten to go to the beach to find a male Selkie to sleep with. And that would usually scare the husband into compliance, especially when he knew that he just simply could not match the
alpha male energy,
phallic prowess of a male Selkie. So in some ways, the myth made men a little bit more careful about being unfaithful, or it encouraged
100%.
them to make their wives happy. Though it did turn out to be a little bit of a double-edged sword, because some men would accuse their wives of sleeping with Selkies so they could disown their own children, saying that they were not theirs. A lot of attractive women that were either unlucky or simply refused to get married were also assumed to be a Selkie, which made people further reject them. It was something along the lines of being branded as a witch. Further north,
you're too pretty,
in
you're
Iceland,
a Selkie, I can't
some
marry
people
you.
believed that Selkies were a kind of sea elf, and many people in Iceland still to this day are very, very serious about their elves. Their Selkies would be more mischievous than helpful if treated poorly. And there was also some superstition when it came to pregnant women eating seal meat, because it was believed that eating certain parts of the seal would make seal-like features appear on their newborn child. It was also believed that if two best friends shared the kidney of a seal together for a meal, they would then turn into enemies to the grave. Another story involving Selkies was that of a woman named Selkola, which means seal head. It began when a farmer and his wife went on a pilgrimage to have their baby daughter baptised. But on the way, they walked through a pass between two large mountains.
Okay.
And in the middle of the mountains was a large stone which was named the Micklestein, meaning the Great Stone.
Okay.
While stopping here and realising they were completely alone, the man and his wife decided to create another mythological creature called the Beast with Two Backs because their home was very crowded and they never got any privacy.
Oh, God.
But they had the baby with them. So they placed the baby on the other side of the stone where it couldn't be seen. Once they were finished and had cleaned themselves up, they got ready to continue their journey. But when they went around the other side of the stone to get their baby daughter, they saw that she was now dead.
Wow.
And she had an evil aura about her. This made the couple run terrified back towards their farm. But while they were running, they could hear their baby's cries echoing through the mountains. So they decided to go back because they thought that she must still be alive. And they went back and the baby was still there, but it was screaming loudly. And it had turned hideous. And it had a blue tinge to its skin. So again, the couple just left the child there and ran back to their farm, assuming that the child had turned evil.
Yeah.
After their return, they told the people of their town what had happened, but most people didn't believe them, with some thinking that they had abandoned their child to die and were making up this story to cover their tracks. A group of local men got together to find and rescue the baby, but after arriving at the Great Stone, there was no baby to be found. But after that day, many people started to see a woman by the stone in the pass, and rumours spread that she had the face of a seal. From then on, they would call the stone Selkies, meaning the seal head stone.
Wow.
As usual with things that people can't understand, the local village was in uproar about this and assumed the woman to be some kind of troll or other type of evil being. When unfortunate events happened, such as farmers losing livestock, the seal woman was blamed. She was even accused of killing all of the seals on the coast, so the island's lifeline of blubber and seal skins was gone. And also, local men would say that she would seduce them while in disguise. Eventually, the farmers of the area decided to grab their torches and pitchforks and head to the seal head stone in order to kill the seal woman. But apparently when they got there, the angry mob were attacked by unknown beings, most likely Selkies. And a bunch of the farmers were killed in the process, which only further added to the stigma about the seal woman in the area. Not every story about the sealhead woman was negative, however. There are other stories of her helping women home after they got lost in snowstorms. Okay. The sealhead woman was recognised by the fact that when she knocked on a door, she did it so hard that it would shake the foundations of the house. But after the door was answered, the seal woman was nowhere to be seen. Only the person she had just helped would be standing in the doorway.
Okay.
It was believed that a bishop had eventually exorcised the seal woman from the land, which does strike me as a little bit of Christian propaganda.
A little bit.
Because it is rumoured that there were dozens of sightings of her in the same area for hundreds of years.
Ooh.
Where is that area? Where is the stone? No idea. We couldn't figure it out. All we know is it's on one of the Scottish Isles, most likely the Orkney Isles. As with most mythological creatures, the Selkie was used to explain the unexplainable. And since there was a large amount of seals in the Orkney Isles, it isn't really hard to see how many people of the past would have used their existence to answer questions they didn't have the answers to. And they also made a great excuse if anyone wanted to cheat on their wife.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was bewitched, darling. It won't happen again. Which may have worked more often than not.
Wow.
But
true.
Even though Selkies are only dangerous if you fuck with them, if you see one, it's probably for the best that you leave it alone.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you on YouTube. Everybody subscribe.
So, we're almost gonna end. I'm gonna just search for one thing here. Actually, maybe even two, and then we'll be done. That was a good one to end on, but we're not gonna end on that because, of course not. Let me just type in Selkies. Celtic myth, the Selkie. Selkies here. See you in history. I'm just curious if there's like sightings or something. Nope, history and see you folklore. Short film about Selkies? That's 9 minutes? No, I think I'm good. Full movie. Sorry, I was just looking. 10 Dark Scottish Legends. Between the Buried and Me, Selkies, The Endless Obsession. It's a song. Bunch of stuff. Let's see. Let's go with elves spotted in real life, because I know that's what we really want to see, right? Want to see some red circle stuff. Oh my god, that's so stupid looking. The finest. All this insider edition of an elf. Come on. 5 scary elf videos. Elves of Iceland. Pixies Tournament at Inconvenient Time. Come on, there's got to be like some kind of channel I've used before. Insider edition. No, I'm not using that. Mexico's President Mythical Elf photo. Really? Where's the mysterious? Why is it all Insider edition on the WoW? Come on, there's got to be something. The usual stuff I use. Elves. Come on. No. Real goblins. No. What is this? I've never heard of this channel called The WoW until I just searched this. The Hidden People of Iceland. Real Life Elf House. Fine. Also, Lifer, I see. I spelled that wrong. Elves spotted in real life. Is there not? There's usually those usual channels you would think, but I don't see any. Africa's best ever. The only African footballer to ever win. Okay. I know. Let's go with Faye spotted in real life. Let's go with that. There's Unexplained Mysteries. Who saw that one already? The woman was able to capture the elves. The clearest image of a fairy ever taken. Oh, fine. Let's watch this then. To end on. It's 8 minutes. Be fine. If he goes on a tangent about the CIA, I'm gonna end.
A fairy is a mythical creature that's usually depicted as being small, having a humanoid body.
This is not the same one. This is 2 years ago, you
is
see.
Even able to glow. The Eastern Virginia Medical School carried out a study in the 1970s.
Did they?
In which they asked everyday Americans about their belief in the supernatural.
Okay.
The study showed that over 2/3 of them had an experience that they couldn't explain. There's many people that believe in certain regions of our planet, small fairy-like creatures can be found, and that at first they can be tough to make out due to how fast they fly. However, those who are able to get decent photographs do show what appears to be tiny fairy-like creatures. This person shared these interesting photographs to their Facebook page.
That's just a plant.
At first glance, they appear to look like the typical fairy we will think of.
Do they? It looks like it's a moth. Oh my god.
My friend from Agartha visited me.
Kill it.
Some of you will say it's just a moth.
It does look like a moth.
I always meet them every night. End quote.
Do they talk to you in a weird language?
With another person saying the following. You must have a very special relationship. They don't like people or cameras from what I understand. End quote.
Well, apparently
this person said this.
Oh god.
These photographs are interesting,
That's
and
a moth.
I think they do show a fairy. If you look at a photograph of a moth and then compare it to this, it's completely different.
It's fucking blurred as shit.
Moths don't have thin bodies and legs like that. I think that people need to be more open-minded about these creatures. I think it's quite obvious that there's something going on.
There's picture distortion. Nothing that looks normal.
My friends have seen creatures that look similar to this, and it's true that when they're around you, they do look like moths. But upon closer inspection, you can see these are tiny fairy-like creatures.
Can I? I think it's a moth.
However, not everyone is convinced by these types of discoveries. Skeptics have pointed out these are just everyday creatures, with one person saying the following. I see these in my garden all the time, and they're not fairies but rather midges. End quote.
Midges?
For those unaware, midges are small flying insects that have a maximum wingspan of 2 to 4 millimeters. There's over 35 different species of these creatures in the UK alone.
Wow.
With wildlife researchers noting that they live in practically every land area outside of dry deserts.
It's a moth.
There's people though that state this isn't what they're seeing in their photographs, and that believe fairy-like creatures do live in certain regions on our planet.
Okay, sure.
It seems that there's no shortage of mysterious creatures living among us.
Among us, no.
The Irish have their leprechauns and the Scandinavians have their trolls. Latin America has El Duende. Standing less than 2 feet tall, El Duende is said to cause mischief wherever they are seen. They are described as being covered in hair,
I barely even know her.
Including long bushy beards for the men. Some also described a wide-brimmed hat. In Latin American folklore, these mysterious creatures can hail from the forest or live inside the walls of your home.
Well, they shouldn't. That's trespassing.
They are mostly seen by children, as they tend to be mischievous and childlike themselves.
Why does it look like that? That looks scary.
Of strange doings around one's home.
That better not be my walls.
You're missing keys or that important paper that went missing. This has caused some to say that these creatures are playing tricks on you. In most stories they seem fairly harmless. Some even suggest offering up your first bite to any meal to them, as to keep them on your good side.
It's in your walls. No, stop.
They are said to lend a helping hand around the house.
I don't want it in my walls.
Other locals have reported that if you get lost in the woods, you can call out to these creatures and they will help you. This seemed to remain true as long as you weren't causing harm. When boys go out to play in the woods, they are warned of the Watcher of the Woods.
I don't like him.
Little boys were told not to make too much mischief in the woods, and not to cause harm to any of the animals. El Duende was always watching you, and if he spotted you doing wrong, he would appear to you and take you to his cave, which many stories state is deep inside the woods. The only way to escape was to fool him into thinking you was one of his kind. El Duende only has 4 fingers. If you could hide your thumb and convince him so, he would let you go.
Okay.
Another tale tells of the sleeping El Duende.
Oh no.
Settling in for a nap, the creature would rest against a tree, slowly disguising themselves
I'm just seeing how much the story of El Duende is in the whole thing here.
Children would find small clay statues of little gnomes throughout the woods, and would sometimes take them home. During the nights they would sneak off back into the woods. When the children awoke and found the figure missing, they knew for sure that they'd plucked one of the small gnomes.
Oh, gnomes too? They're in here? Why?
They sound like childish tales. Many have come forward with alleged proof of these creatures' existence.
Have they? Can we see it?
There have been many sightings, pictures, and videos that point to this creature being genuine.
I don't need this like stock footage.
Many people, whether they believe in many folktales or not,
it's the same thing repeat over and over again. Oh, what's this? Oh, the fairy again. We're gonna get back to that?
Some put them in the same category as Bigfoot or Chupacabra.
What?
Others believe it just to be a cautionary tale to boys heading into the woods. Whether it's a tale to keep children out of trouble, or simply a tale meant to elicit fear, urban legends will continue to be told as long as stories exist. It may be because they're just fun. Some believe, however, it gives us a very keen insight into our deepest fears as humans.
What?
Perhaps it's that that keeps us coming back for more.
Does it?
Others suggest that the majority of these stories are based on real events.
Well, I don't know who those people are,
just been retold.
I don't know what to think
about
them.
As mentioned earlier, there's no shortage of mysterious creature encounters, and every year people come forward with their stories.
Wow.
Detailing impossible to explain creatures. Perhaps the study of cryptids needs to be taken more seriously.
I don't know with this evidence, I don't know if you should.
After all, people from all around the world have reported encountering creatures not recognized by science, with some even...
Okay.
So what do you guys make of these photographs?
They're moths. Okay, anyway. With that being said, we have come to the end of the Eerie Hours. I'd like to thank you all for sticking with me and taking a watch tonight. We do a little shilling and then we'll be done. Don't forget the movie caption contest, movie picture, and movie Hangman are going in Discord, so be sure to play those. Don't forget tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Porky has something a little planned for us, so be sure to tune for that as well. And Sunday will be a nice relaxing Discord stream where I'll probably be starting at 9 and watching a few things. So be there for that. If you're not, that's alright. I understand. Busy. That's just life. But anyway, have a good night, everybody. I'll see you guys later. Peace.